Okay, great. Welcome everyone. Welcome to our NIHR Fellowship information session. I'm Peter Lovell. I'm Director for the NIHR Research Design Service here in London, and I'll be chairing the session today. For the first part, we'll be sharing information with you through a series of talks. We'll start with an overview from the NIHR Academy on their funding opportunities, and today we're focusing on the development and skills enhancement and the advanced postdoc awards. We have two previously successful applicants who will share their first-hand experiences of applying for a fellowship. We have an NIHR committee member with us, somebody who sits on the interviews, and we'll describe what the RDS can offer. We will then reconvene as a panel and have a Q&A session with all the panel members. Just a little bit on the housekeeping. As you may have heard at the start, we're going to record today's session, and that'll be available for you to take a look back at and to use as reference. So no real need to take notes today. Be nice to see you, so use video if you'd like to. Can we ask you to put your microphones on mute through the presentation so we don't get any unnecessary feedback? We can take questions either through the raise hand function or put your questions in the chat. Feel free to tweet about the event. You can follow us on our Twitter account, or indeed have a look at our website for further information about the RDS. So today's session is part of a wider programme of support available from the RDS. If you'd like to develop an application, we strongly advise you to sign up. We'd be very pleased to review drafts of your application, either for submission for one of the summer deadlines, or indeed work with you over a longer period of time for a later deadline. So you should have all had a copy of today's programme. It's about a 2-hour session in all. I think we're going to try and power through and just do it in one session. So I'm going to now introduce and hand over to our first speakers, who are Tom Pratt and Gareth O'Brien, both within the personal awards team at the Academy, and they're going to give us an overview of the schemes. So over to you, Tom and Gareth.
Thanks, Peter. I'll just bring up the presentation.
Not yet. Yeah, here it comes. Yep, I see that.
You see that full screen?
Yep, full screen.
Perfect. Okay, so morning everyone. Thanks very much for coming. I'm Gareth O'Brien. You can see my colleague Tom has appeared on video as well. He's just put his hand up. There he is. So today we're going to talk to you about some of the postdoctoral fellowships that the Academy offer and the opportunities at that level. So I'm going to start off by giving you a very quick idea of what the Academy do, just in case you're unfamiliar with us. So it's our remit to develop and coordinate academic training, career development and research capacity development. And we do that through managing national competitions with the aim of attracting, training and supporting people conducting research for the needs of service users and the public, really, and that's to develop skills of the next generation of health and care researchers. Today we're going to focus on the opportunities that we've got at postdoctoral level. And as you can see from the slide, that's actually for a range of professionals, and there's a range of options, and we've increased our offer in this space quite recently. So hopefully we can give you a whistle-stop tour of that today. I want to first quickly talk about the Academy remit for personal awards. This is made really clear in our guidance, and I would encourage you to read those if you're considering submitting an application. But really the key messages that I want to get across is the overall remit for the Academy is sort of early translational, clinical and applied health and social care research, and they must have clear potential for directly benefiting patients and service users, carers and the public. For advanced fellowships and postdoctoral level, which we're talking about today, early translational research is within remit, but it's got to have that clear and plausible path to patient and service user benefit. We don't do any work supporting basic research or work involving animals or their tissue. And we've got quite a clear statement on our remit around biomarkers, which is on the screen. It's also important to note that we support educational research and methodological research, and that's medical education, social care education, and sort of educational research right across the spectrum. But again, the key thing to consider really is that no matter what your proposal is, no matter what the topic or subject area is, that potential impact on patients, service users, carers, or the public must be made really clear as part of your statement. I want to cover what we fund. Although this varies by award, generally speaking, we'll cover your salary, then this is your academic and clinical time. We include budgets for conferences and research visits. We fund all of your research costs, your academic training costs, and then you'll have a training and development budget as well. And this is really to make sure that the award can be used as a vehicle to take you from where you are at the moment to where you want to be at the end of your award. And that, I think, is a really unique offer in that we fund your entire training and development budget to make sure that you can follow that path. I guess one of the things to consider as we talk to you about these opportunities today at postdoc level is which award is for you. So what are you bringing to the table in terms of a researcher, and where do you want to be? So we've got awards that are for certain professions, and we've also got fellowships that are for all backgrounds. And really, you want to consider where your research career stage is at the moment and your experience so far, and where you want to be following the completion of your award. So this is what I'm going to focus on initially. This is our Development and Skills Enhancement Award. This is designed to support people to gain specific skills and experience for the next phase of their research career. And to be eligible for this, your proposed host has got to be a higher education institution, a university, an NHS body, or provider of health and care services. Because it's a postdoc award, we'd expect you to either hold a relevant postdoc qualification or have submitted your thesis. But the key thing to note here is that you must have been awarded this postdoc qualification by the time that your award is to start. And for clinical academics who are applying for this award, you must have completed your relevant pre-registration training. There's also a small thing to consider around applications per round. So one of the eligibility criteria for this particular award is to have not submitted a Development and Skills Enhancement Award application in the previous round. In terms of what we fund and support for this award, it's a smaller scale award. It's a 1 year maximum between 50 and 100% whole time equivalent. And as I said on the previous slide, we fund salary, training, development, and supervision. But there is an expectation in this for matched funding from your host organisation. This will be assessed at the application stage. So we, even from sort of smaller, less research active trusts who might have a smaller research budget, we're keen to consider individual circumstances about why matched funding is at certain levels. So although there'll be an expectation of some matched funding, we do consider it on a case-by-case basis. We've also very recently made some changes to increase the number of applications to this award. The key one to note is that previously you must have been an NIHR Academy member to apply for this. We've removed that criteria. So now you can be anyone, really. You don't have to be interacting with us in any way. And we wanted to increase the number of applications to this award because we recognise it's actually a really important thing to progress you to that sort of experienced postdoc level where you can submit a competitive application to some of our other more advanced fellowship opportunities. The other change that we've made is now it's open all year round. So we used to have sort of submission deadlines, and they won't be visible anymore. So you can pop an application in at any time. But it's important to note that there'll be 3 submission windows per year, and they'll be reviewed. And I'll talk about that very shortly. So in terms of the assessment criteria, we look at your person, your place, and your training. With regards to the person, it's about your trajectory to become a future research leader and about that sort of continued commitment to your research career. When we're considering your place and training, it's the support that you've got in place from your host organisation and how those statements come across, the provision of the academic environment around you, including your supervision and your mentorship. And really what's critical, I think, for the DSE is that clear plan of how this award will support your future funding for research within our remit. So what's next after DSE and why does this award help you to get there is the sort of things that the committee are looking for. So it's really crucial to properly consider the training and development plan that you submit for this award, because that's what the committee are looking for, is that vehicle to get you to the next level to be able to submit a competitive application. Just very quickly in terms of the process, before I hand over to Tom to talk about the other options we've got at advanced level. This is now, the application window will not be as visible as it was before. We've still got 3 rounds per year. After you've submitted your application, this will go to our selection committee to review. You will have 3 reviewers who will look at your application and review the criteria that I just spoke about on the previous slide. That will go to a shortlisting meeting where we will have the committee sit around a table. We'll discuss all the applications. We'll discuss the strengths and the weaknesses of them, and then we'll submit recommendations for funding to our colleagues at the Department of Health and Social Care. And once those recommendations have been confirmed, the outcomes will be confirmed with the applicants, and then the awards will follow that. And what's important to note, I think, is that all applications are reviewed by the committee. They'll look for that criteria that I spoke about previously, and it's just about how this award can be used as a vehicle to get you to where you want to be following the completion of it. So it's a different award in terms of like a full-scale fellowship. It's really about developing you as a person, and that's really in the title. So I'll hand over to Tom, and we're going to do our best version of Chris Whitty with next slide, please, as we fire through the rest of the slides for the presentation.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to say it's. I never used to think about it before the pandemic, and now, yeah, I'll do my best Chris Whitty impression. So in terms of what I'm going to cover, I'm just going to go over the Advanced Fellowship in terms of what that offers, and then also cover the similar schemes that come under the NIHR scheme and also the Local Authority Fellowship scheme as well. So just go over the similarities, but also what's distinctive about those different offers. So in terms of what we're looking to do with the Advanced Fellowship, so in terms of who this is aimed at, for those that aren't aware, this replaced a number of different postdoc schemes. So what we're looking to do is to have a very flexible award, which is aimed at people all across their postdoctoral career. So similar to what Gareth outlined for the DSE eligibility, as long as you submitted your PhD thesis at the point of application. And we say when the point of application, we mean the closing date for a particular round. You're eligible, and as long as you're not appointed to a post of professor at the point of application, you're eligible. So it's there for people at early stages of the postdoc career, people establishing their independence. It's also there for people that are looking to make a transition. Maybe you've been working in basic science, you're looking to more of the applied health remit for NIHR, and you want to use this as a springboard to make that change. Or potentially coming back from a return from a career break or other time away from research. This award is open to clinical and non-clinical applicants at any professional background, as long as you've got a research proposal that's within our remit that Gareth has covered. With this particular award, there's the option of clinical and practice time. So it's there because it replaced an award called Clinician Scientist, which supported medics and dentists to be clinical academics. We didn't want to take that offer away, but then expand it to other professional registration applicants as well. So there's the option of up to 40%. It's optional, and you can have slightly less than that. So you just need to decide what kind of best fits for you. In terms of eligibility, very similar to what Gareth outlined for the DSE. So as we mentioned, that whole range of postdoc careers from submitting your PhD thesis up to not being a prof. And in terms of the host, it can be whichever fits for you. It can be a university, it can be an NHS body, it can be a provider of health and or care services, or potentially a local authority. So whichever kind of partnership works for you. So if I could have the next slide, please. So in terms of what we support, just to go into specifics for the Advanced Fellowship. So the flexibility we try to offer with this is a range of different durations. So you can choose 2, 3, 4, or 5 years as a full-time option. And then within those options, there is part-time working percentages. So anywhere between 50 and 100% in increments of 5. So potentially there's 44 different durations. So again, it's up to you to decide how long you want for a particular award, what stage of your career you think suits that duration. Within that award, we'll fund your professional salary, your research costs for your project, the training and development fund, that £2,000 per year for conference-related costs as well. You can apply for 2 advanced fellowships because in the previous layout of schemes, you could have had a number of different postdoc awards. So we didn't want to take that away and just limit you to 1. So what we said, you can have 2 fellowships as long as the total duration isn't more than 8 years. So it can be, 2 4-year awards back to back. You can have, maybe a 3-year award, have a break, come back and apply for 5 years later on, whichever suits you in your journey. In terms of what we're looking for, and I think this will come through in the talks from Polly, Jane, and Armin as well. What the committee are looking for is that person, project, training in place element. So, the trajectory for your research career stage and background. And just to give you some context for the Advanced Fellowship, I know that I've said this is a wide range of eligibility, and there'll be people at very different stages of their career. For the Advanced Fellowship, we do have 2 separate committees, and Jane Sandel is on one of those. One tends to look at people at the earlier stage of their postdoc career, and one looks at people at the slightly later stage. But I wouldn't get too hung up on which committee you're looked at. So Jane and her colleagues are very good at looking at people on their own merits. So looking at what their career journey's been, what chance of impacts they've had, and what opportunities they've made of that. So it is a fair process. So we just try and make sure that it's not based on who's got the best metrics or anything like that. It's very much based on your own application and your career journey and what case you're making for this award. The project will get looked at as well. Oh, sorry, Gareth, thank you. So the project will get looked at as well in terms of the how it acts as a vehicle for your development. There's the training aspect as well, which will be viewed on, and also the place in terms of what mentorship team you'll have in your award, and also what the host organisation is providing as well. Okay, next slide, please. So that's the Advanced Fellowship, open for all professional backgrounds. I'm just going to move on to the NIHR programme. So this is a separate programme designed to support clinical academics and practitioner academics. There is a wide range of different professions. It's sometimes easier to refer to it as the non-medics and dentists, but that's a little bit, I don't want to be too flippant about that in terms of who we're supporting, but it is the list of different professions here. So it's covering your AHPs, your physios, speech and language therapists, OTs, nurses, midwives, social workers, healthcare scientists, non-medical and public health practitioners. So there's a wide range of that. I would recommend, if you're in any of these professional registrations and you're not in the NIHR programme, to get in touch with us, because we're always looking to expand that if we feel there's a profession out there that we want to support through this programme. So the next slide, please. So there's a lot of text on here, but I mean, just for people that can read, I'm sure these slides will be sent around later. So this is very much the same setup as the Advanced Fellowship, but if I can just have, there's a couple of points I think later on this slide, if you can bring those up, Gareth. Yeah, so in terms of the difference here, the practice time in the Advanced Fellowship is there as an option for people. For the NIHR programme, the practice time has to be in there, because this is very much focused on developing you as an academic, but also as a practitioner as well. So for this, there has to be between 20 and 40% that's dedicated to your development as a practitioner as well. So that'll be funded through the fellowship. And also the training aspect is slightly different as well. Whereas in the Advanced Fellowship, the focus is very much on your academic development. For the NIHR programme, there will be a focus on your practice development as well. And you'll have to reflect that in your mentorship as well. So you'll have academic and practice mentors. The dates for this are fairly similar. So the Advanced Fellowship launches in April and October. So there's 2 rounds each year. NIHR's fairly similar. There might be ones that start a little bit earlier in March, but generally both schemes open around the same time and are open for around 2 to 3 months for you to apply. So we'll move on to the Local Authority Fellowship. So this is a relatively new one, particularly at the postdoctoral level. This is due to open this year for the first time. So what we're looking to do here, particularly with the kind of the broadening of the NIHR remit, is, we've always traditionally supported people in universities, and with the NIHR scheme, we kind of get a few more from the NHS trust employed background. So what we're looking to do with this scheme is to expand into people employed in local authorities. So there is some wording here which we can kind of share again, in terms of the general gist is that if you're employed at a local authority, you're eligible. There are some kind of caveats to that, in terms of if it's a provider of local authority commission services, you might be eligible, and also if there's a partnership potentially with a charity or non-profit. where you're working in conjunction with a local authority, not necessarily on a kind of paid commission basis. That also might be eligible. So what I'd recommend is, if you think you might be suitable for this, get in touch and we can just go through your circumstances and just check your eligibility for that. So the next slide will refer to the advanced fellowship offer for local authority fellowships. Again, it's the same kind of setup in terms of who we're trying to aim this at, what level of support that we provide. There will be practice time that's included. Again, this is mandatory in terms of we're looking to support practitioners through this. So very similar to the ICA setup. And then in terms of the dates, this for the moment will be an annual round, which will open in March each year. So that's the slight difference, whereas the advanced fellowship and the ICA version are open twice a year. For the local authority one, it's just on an annual basis for now. But that might be reviewed in the future, but just to bear in mind for that. The assessment process differs slightly from the DSE that Gareth outlined. So for this, there'll be the application window, there will be the submission. And just to mention this now, in terms of our main tip is to ensure that you do meet the remit. So between application window and selection committee review, Gareth and myself and the rest of the team will have a process where we check the eligibility and the remit. And you'd be surprised each round there for the advanced fellowship anyway, there's kind of 2 or 3 that drop out at that stage because they've not checked with us, they've not checked with the RDS that they meet the remit. And it gets rejected at that stage before it even gets to Jane and her colleagues on the committee. But assuming that you follow this advice and kind of preaching to the converted if people are here, that you will check the remit, it will be sent to the selection committee. 3 reviewers per application will look at that. The chairing team will then discuss those scores at the shortlisted meeting and decide who then continues the external peer review. We've got a wide mix of different professions and expertise on the committee, but we can't have experts in every single project because we have such a wide remit. So it will go out to external experts to review the research element. Then we will invite people to come to interviews. The format of this is being reviewed. Traditionally, this was face-to-face interviews in Leeds. We have we moved to Zoom during the pandemic, and we're just reviewing what's the best process for the future. So yeah, keep an eye on that for now. Following the interviews, the selection committee will make their recommendations. Then we will ask the Department of Health and Social Care to confirm this. There is a bit of a lead time in terms of your interview. It can be 4 to 6 weeks from when you hear the outcome from that. So don't be concerned by that lead time, but just be aware that there will be a delay. And then we have the outcomes confirmed. We'll start the contracting and then awards will start. But generally speaking, from the application window to the award start, it's at least 12 months, depending on how quickly you want to start that. But generally speaking, it's a 12-month process from application to starting. Just wanted to touch upon partnership fellowships. I know this comes up quite often, and we had this during a chat with the RDS yesterday. So it's relatively new for the NIHR. We have partnered with charities, and we're also looking to partner with industry as well. We've partnered with Pfizer recently. So the aim of this is that as an applicant, you won't notice anything different in your application process. So there will be a drop down in the advanced fellowship form listing all the different partners for that round. It will change round by round, and we'll have in the guidance who's available in this round. So it's for you to check if you think you're in that remit for that charity. You can select that you'd like to apply for a partnership fellowship, and it might be worth contacting the charities as well, just to have a quick chat with them. But in terms of the process, it would be exactly the same. It's looked at by the same committee. You would be interviewed as normal, and then we would check with the charity if they're happy to fund it. But the charity aren't involved in the assessment process as such. It would just be our main committee. So the advantage to this is that our money can go a little bit further because we're going in 50-50 funding agreements, and the benefit for you as an applicant is that you can increase your network with a charity that is relevant to your research. So we're looking to expand this, and we'll kind of take any questions on that later on as well. And then I just want to touch upon a couple of developments coming in. So you might notice there's a few differences for the upcoming round. There is a relatively new award, Population Health Career Scientist Award. This is aimed at people that are more experienced postdocs, that kind of coming up to reader, associate prof level, working in population health, and it might come from slightly different non-traditional backgrounds that we'd fund. Again, this will be an option during the advanced fellowship application form, so you can select if you want to apply for that. There is a slightly different remit to that, and we'll have details in the guidance notes. So again, you can look to see if you think you you apply for that. And we can always check, if you apply for that, we will just double check that you definitely want to stick with that. And if you want to go back into the advanced fellowship pot, then you can do that, but there is that option. We're also looking to partner with some of the program grants. So as a pilot, we have tried this before, but we're trying it now as a slightly different format, linking with the efficacy mechanism and evaluation program grant that's run in a different part of NIHR. So this would fund a clinical trial, and the advanced fellowship would pick up.
Ciao Enrico. No, dimmi.
Oh, sorry, I think we've got some. Oh, there we go. Sorry, thought I was getting heckled. So yeah, in terms of the EME program would pick up the research costs, and the advanced fellowship would pick up the salary costs for yourself in a training fund. It will be a single application form. We have tried this before, where we asked people to fill out 2 application forms, and there was an element of double jeopardy. So this will be a single application form with a slightly different committee joining EME and advanced fellowship committee members. So again, there'll be more details in the guidance notes coming out. So that should be launching in April. I think in terms of pre-application advice, I don't want to step on the toes of the next speaker, so we'll probably just leave it this slide. But what I would just say is to emphasize the most important thing for us is 2 aspects: is making sure your application is submitted on time, allow plenty of time for that, because Gareth and myself and the rest of the team will always get calls from people. We've got pre-doc fellowship closing today, and there's always a number of people that are phoning for extensions because their head of department's not in the office, or something's gone wrong. So please allow plenty of time, because there's no extensions for that. And also the remit as well, so please ensure that you meet the remit, so it doesn't fall in that gap between submitting and even getting to the selection committee. So I'll leave it there if Gareth wants to stop sharing slides, and yeah, happy to take questions in the Q&A.
Great. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Gareth. Thanks for keeping us on time. As said, we'll take questions in the Q&A. So we're going to move straight on to our next speaker today, who's Arman Eshaghi. Arman's a senior research fellow at the Institute of Neurology at UCL, and today he's going to tell us about his experiences of applying for an advanced fellowship. So over to you, Arman.
Many thanks, Peter, and thank you, Paul, for organizing this very important event. Everyone, I put my slides on full screen, so hopefully you can see it. If not, do let me know.
Yeah, looking good.
Excellent. So what I'm going to talk about the next 15 to 20 minutes is going to complement Tom's and Gareth's view from the other side, from the view of the applicant. So I have one disclaimer, as I'm not, a panel member, or I'm just giving you an outsider in a way. I'm not. I have applied and I've seen just one application, which is my application, and therefore you need to interpret it in your own way. I try to keep the language very generic, so I'm not getting into any details, just because I want this to be appealing to everyone from any background, any sort of fellowships. So Tom showed us lots of different schemes. I feel like what I'm going to present today should be applied to even different schemes. So I try to keep it very generic. I'll speak about why, when, and how you can apply, and also tips that I've learned, again, as a person along the way. As was also mentioned, when I was looking at my own career, when you want to think about, usually you have done your PhD, and then you want to start to apply, become a postdoc, and you start to apply to fellowships to have a relatively independent career, and then to become fully independent. So that time is a bottom-up approach. You don't look at the fellowships and say, okay, how do I match this? It's really was an internal feeling for me when I realized, for example, I was working in clinical trial setting in multiple sclerosis or MS, and for many years I realized I want to move into an applied healthcare setting and research. And through that search across, I would say, many years, and speaking with mentors, advanced fellowship was one of the, I would say, the most ideal fellowship for me. And it's really important when I was looking at the fellowship and what it provides, you should be able to convince yourself that the fellowship does provide a step change. So it's not just a continuation of your work. It's not, working, just collaborating with a group is not a grant, is a fellowship, is a personal fellowship. And again, for me, the step change was to providing with the, in a way, as a catapult to change my research direction from a purely focus on, for example, I work in in machine learning and AI applied to medical images in clinical trials to take that into NHS as a research tool to, of course, benefit patients. So one of the things I found looking at different fellowship schemes, what advanced fellowship does provide is the ability and I would say the generosity for training. So the training opportunity is as important as the research program, in my opinion. And unlike many other schemes by other funders, the training part for the advanced fellowship is essential, is part of the process. And that could just not be your techniques that you use. It could, for me, for example, it was PPI. I do have an aspect that looking at how we can involve patients better, so we can have training and, of course, ask for resources. So the other area that I use this fellowship to enter is health economics. I have a mentor, and I don't have any prior experience in health economics, but obviously the idea here is to have a step change. And the other area that I looked at is the commercialization. Again, Tom and Garrett, they mentioned there are, it's really, you tailor the fellowship for your own needs. I give you a few examples on how the training in the commercialization may work. And the idea is again, to benefit patients as a research scientist. And the other side is the program of research. The program of research for myself is very diverse. It goes across institutes and it goes across the countries. And there is no limit. Even NIHR, as was mentioned, they look for English trusts and applicants. That does not mean you need to involve, for example, English trusts or hospitals. I have trusts in Belfast, in Scotland, in Canada. So the idea is to really benefit and to become an international leader by expanding your skill set. So my journey in my career, I did my medicine as a medic in Iran. I moved to the UK after my MD, and I did a PhD at UCL in computer science. I then did a postdoc in the UK, but also in Canada, between the two countries, working on clinical trials. And again, I used advanced fellowship to move into applied health research in the UK at UCL. And the stage of career, Tom showed us two different categories that you can apply for advanced fellowship. One is towards the end of PhD, when you are finishing and when you have your PhD in hand, you can start there. And I'm the second category, when I had significant publications and experience as a postdoctoral fellow before getting into the advanced fellowship. So I get more in the next few minutes into how and a few tips on how you can apply and how you can actually take advantage of an RDS, which was the essential part of my application process. So one area that is very important, Tom mentioned patient public involvement is not an afterthought. And we mean it when we say that, because NIHR we are trying to impact patient care, healthcare services, and the users of services are patients. If patients are not involved, it's like finding a hammer and you have problems to exactly find a nail to work for you. So this is an essential part of it. And I have to say, RDS can help you, and it helped me in different aspects of my fellowship. But one area which I really didn't have that much experience was PPI. I applied for my fellowship, I believe it was in December 2021. But I was in contact with the RDS probably before summer 2021. And as Tom mentioned, you need to, and I started my fellowship about 4 months ago. And so I can say you need to contact RDS as early as possible. And what did they do for me? They helped me to find steering committee members from the member of the PPI steering committee. There were funds. Again, my information is about 1 year, could be 1 year and slightly outdated, 1 year old. But at the time, there were funds that you could use, for example, to compensate the member of the public for their time if they contribute to a proposal with minimal paperwork. Really, it's not a big, we need to be able to have resources to even approach the public. So that was an area very important. I used a website, People in Research website. Again, at the time was the way to advertise your even proposal to talk to patients. Of course, you can use charities as a way to speak to patients, and I did that. And patients and the member of the public, so it could be social carers, could be carers, could be even members who are not necessarily patients, but who are, have a keen interest in improving healthcare. I had patients as collaborators. So again, it's not an afterthought. You have them to shape your proposal, especially a chronic disease such as multiple sclerosis, which is the area I work on. Patients have really valuable feedback that you cannot get from anywhere else. And it should be clear, and it was clear, it changed my application, for example, how we even what questionnaire we're going to look at, what areas we're going to look at. So we can include patients as a steering committee member, and they govern the research in a sense that they can even help you for your even data analysis. Not that doing that depends on the research, of course, but you're providing a different point of view. And again, they obviously not for fellowships, they cannot be a co-applicant. You are the only applicant, but you need to have this sort of approach to patients, that they can even be co-authoring your papers. Think of it as at that point of view. The other area which I was very helpful for me was to look into the equity. So the equity, I think, is very important for healthcare systems. This is an area, again, I'm working as a methodological research, which is the area I'm working on. Sometimes it's easy to overlook when I approach RDS and when I sent my application for review. This issue was brought up early on, and this is a big problem for NHS, whatever you do, really. The life expectancy, for example, in wealthy areas of London compared to even 10 miles away could be 10, 15 years difference. That means for me, for example, it was translated into involving hospitals out of London, in other areas in Scotland, even, for example, looking at the prevalence of MS, there are huge differences across the country. The equity in research, the idea of your advanced fellowship is to prepare you for a future leader in the UK healthcare system. And that basically means you need to have that vision, and that vision goes, to your team members, goes to your PPI committee members. For example, I had members who, like myself, are from Asian minority backgrounds, the balance of genders, and that includes my mentors. So again, these are soft skills, I would say, but it just, gives you a different way of thinking, that once you become a leader, you will include equity. It's not just research in the way of your life. And as I mentioned, geographical diversity. This is extremely important, at least for the disease I work on in multiple sclerosis. And the solutions we want to have in NIHR is to solve problems for everyone. It's not for a research setting. Is to be applied to trusts across the country. So collaboration. So the way I built up collaborations, as this is really, we need to think about, it's about you and what kind of people you can involve. Again, Tom mentioned there is no, it's really important. Of course, your research should be within the remit of NIHR. And as long as it's there, I had mentors, clinical mentors, for example, mentors who are computer scientists. Is completely different, obviously, background, different departments, different institutes. I had mentors from and research support mentors from different institutes. They don't necessarily are at UCL or not even in the UK. So, I had a search and a global search to find the best people who could help me to deliver the research. And the other area is health economics. So these are, you see, the three areas that are completely, when you think of it, not directly related. But they come together, they converge in you as a person to deliver the important research you're doing. I had industrial collaborations. It's clearly not necessary, I would think, but it brings a lot of value to my research. For example, data, I used pharmaceutical companies as part of that. Again, my research is not about data from pharmaceutical companies, but I was using that as a use case and bringing new innovations in AI, for example, risk factors to NHS data. You can use industrial collaborations for expertise. I have collaborators, for example, in NVIDIA, who help us to design AI models for future application in NHS. There are also a combination of SMEs, small companies and large companies. They have different aspects, and they can bring expertise, and sometimes they can even provide, for example, match funding for part of a studentship. For my fellowship came from a small company that are interested, for example, in processing MRI scans. Institutional support, again, as Tom and Gareth mentioned, is extremely important. As a junior postdoc at the time, I had to be very proactive. Usually there is, at least at UCL, there is no transparent mechanism where you can go through and to get institutional support. You need to go to your mentors and be proactive and negotiate, really, because you know, an NIHR funding for 5 years is a huge investment. Of course, for your career is extremely important. It's very prestigious, and you know, you have a case of negotiating. And what does that mean exactly? Of course, that depends on the career stage. I give you examples, and as I said, you know, the disclaimer is this is my personal experience. You need to interpret this for your own research question. For example, it could be a contribution from the university for technician salary. It could be funding for PhD students. Again, I'm at a more senior position, so I can handle a PhD student, of course. I don't think, you know, if you are early in your career, you're doing your PhD, and probably you cannot have a PhD student immediately. But depending on your career, you need to be able to negotiate and improve that. The other side that's, I think it's very obvious, but I feel like it's an area that I failed a lot, is in the writing. For myself, English is not my first language, but I think it's more than that. You know, even if English is your native language, and the way we write, as again was mentioned by previous speakers, the panel members are rarely experts in your field. And sometimes even for a multidisciplinary research, even your external peer reviewers, if they are expert, they're usually expert in one area. They cannot be expert in all the different aspects of a 5-year fellowship. So in my opinion, you need I tried, and I'll show you a few failures, but I spend a lot of time to make sure to be able to communicate. It's also very important for your PPI side of things to communicate in plain English. There is a plain English summary in the fellowship, but my suggestion would be to do that basically for the whole application. And of course, the revisions that I went through many times. Again, I'll show you in the next few slides, and then I finish my talk. You can use RDS to get feedback. I had many meetings, you know, Teams meetings, one-to-one, and I was very generous of RDS, but also by email. My application was reviewed on multiple occasions. I received a lot of very important feedback, and sometimes you really need to go back to the drawing board and change the application. So, you know, that's the kind of mentality to have. And this is the kind of the mentality I said, this is the principle I apply, is the Anna Karenina principle. So they say that all happy families are like each other, but each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. So when you translate this to fellowship applications, I should say, you know, we are here in this RDS event. I'm telling you about the successful application. Actually, I didn't coordinate with Tom. I should say lots of things I mentioned is exactly what Tom mentioned. But the important point for me, the learning point, is to fail and to learn from those failures, because each time you're unsuccessful, you're unsuccessful in its own, you know, in a very unique way. So that uniqueness, you learn from that uniqueness. I'm very grateful to NIHR that I got funded, but I didn't learn that much from the successful experience. I learned a lot from my failure. So, you know, as a person who's failed a lot, it's really important, you know, to normalize that failure. On the left, I've listed the number of applications I've done, and they have been unsuccessful. I think they may count to 8 or 9. And it's easy to say, you know, you're successful, you succeed on your first try. That just doesn't happen, because, you know, I think that's how you should work and how you should use this cycle. So I plan, you write an application, you fail, you learn, and you improve. I do think for advanced fellowship, you only have 2 tries, so please do use your opportunities wisely. But the point is, you know, this to be able to improve on different aspects, you need to fail like me. I think I failed for 6-7 years, if not longer, to learn and, you know, to improve on. And of course, these different applications, so it's very different. You know, each time they improve. And I want to thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Armand, for sharing your insights and your journey. That's very helpful. Armand's going to join us for the Q&A a bit later as well, so you'll be able to ask him a few more questions then. We're going to move on. We're going to move on now to a talk from Polly Livermore. Polly is a clinical academic program lead for nurses and midwives at Great Ormond Street. Unfortunately, Polly can't be with us today, but she's sent us a recording of her talk. So Paul, I'm hoping you can share that with us now.
Absolutely. I'm going to leave my mic open while I do it. I'm just going to press play. Peter, you let me know if you can't hear sound.
So thank you very much, RDS, for inviting me to come and talk to you today. My name is Dr. Polly Livermore. I have a number of hats at the moment. I'm a rheumatology matron at Great Ormond Street Children's Hospital. I'm also the BRC Clinical Academic Programme Lead, which I'll touch on, and I hold a current NIHR Development and Skills Enhancement Award. So I was asked to come and talk today about my journey and give you some hints and tips. So this is kind of a schema really, which just shows my journey, and this fits very nicely with some of the comments and some of the audience today put in the chat about the journey ahead and how kind of scary and daunting it can be for many different reasons. So I've been a rheumatology nurse since 1997 in a variety of different roles as a research nurse, a nurse on a ward, an advanced nurse practitioner, and then I kind of hit a ceiling really and ended up going into management and became a kind of rheumatology matron, trying to keep my clinical hand in. But throughout that time, I knew I wanted to do a PhD. It's been something I've wanted to do for many years. So I applied to the NIHR to do a clinical doctoral research fellowship. And as you can see, I applied in May 16 and that was awarded in December. So that took a good 6 months or so before I heard about that. And then I started my PhD award. So that originally was 3 years full time, but 2 years into that, I was offered the clinical academic programme lead role at GOSH. So what I do in that time is I run the internship programme. So I teach about research for nurses and allied health professionals across the trust, and specifically what applying for fellowship involves and what kind of things the NIHR in particular is looking for. And so when I had to then slow down my PhD because obviously I was working half time, and then I returned to the matron role in September 2020. So thinking about kind of my future and where I could go, at the time I didn't feel ready to put in a clinical lectureship application. I wanted to have a little bit of time to really make a good application. So the Development and Skills Enhancement Award was absolutely perfect for me. And just a couple of things to highlight, you can see how many less words it was. So it was 35 words instead of the 67 that the PhD application needed for me. And also the time kind of difference. So I applied in the August rounds and I heard in October. So it was much quicker from before the previous May to December. And so I got my DSE award, which was fabulous, and I started that this January. And I've started at half time with my clinical academic lead role. And the reason for that is because I'm already have teaching programs set up, and I have a commitment that I felt would be really hard to let the clinical services down. So I stepped out of the matron role to do this. Also just to highlight, which I'll touch on in a bit, is I did also apply for the RDS EPIE award, successful at that. And all of this is working together to go ahead for what would have been previously the clinical lectureship, but now the ACAF, as you've just heard, and hopefully with an application this June. So just to give you a little bit of what my understanding of the key remit for the development and skills was. So as I've got the old picture, I'm not as clever as Tom and haven't changed mine, but it was this green bit here that I was applying for as an early postdoc. And the understanding was that it was for current or previous members of the NIHR Academy. So it was someone who had to be in the NIHR over the last year. So that immediately narrows down how many people are going to apply for it, which is great in many ways. And you, as we've heard, you have to really show how this application will help you succeed at next steps. And that was fine for me because I was quite clear in where I was going, where I hope I'm going anyway. And the maximum funded award length was for a year. And I will tell you a little bit what I applied for in a minute, but it was for a year. As we've heard, there's numerous rounds, and that was absolutely fabulous. I had a rocky road last year with a couple of bereavements, close family bereavements, and that meant I missed the round I was actually going for. But that was fine because there was another round coming around pretty quickly. The matched funding was sticky for me, as I think it is sticky for most people, and I will touch on that, but I had to think creatively. I am a clinical nurse by background, and my clinical team wanted me to do nursing. They had released me for 3 years to go off and do my PhD, and they wanted me back. And actually it was really hard to justify and to explain and to get them to understand what's really involved. So I'll touch on that. And as we've heard, the training plan is key. This is a training award, a development and skills about what you need to do the next step. So for me, this is just one slide about what my award was about. So I applied for 1 year salary. I was applying for half time, so I was applying for the matron bit of my role to run for all of this year. I was originally supposed to start last December, but the clinical team wouldn't let me go, so I've started this January for a year. And what I needed to do when I was thinking about my gaps in particular, so I had done a scoping review as part of my PhD, and now as a PhD supervisor, I'm supervising students who are doing systematic reviews and hoping to do a systematic review in my ACAF in the future. So it was really important that I got a good grounding in that. My ACAF is about bringing in an intervention for children and young people with rheumatology conditions. So I wanted some really strong intervention development so that I could put a really strong application in with hitting all the bits that I needed to hit. And then obviously when you've got an intervention, you need to work out how to implement it and how to make it sustainable in the NHS and think about all the things you need to think about with costings, etc. So I've got some implementation science as part of my training. And what was really important to me was making this project co-design. And so I've done a fabulous course on evidence-based co-design so far, and that will really help me put a really strong application in. The NIHR also love visits. They love for you to show how you're going to become an all-rounder and develop all areas of yourself. And using a visit is actually a really good way of showing your clinical kind of development and learning from other centres. So as you can see there, I've got a couple of visits that were appropriate to the project I was putting in for. And then conferences, so you still get conference attendance and you get some funds for that. So for me, it was important that I go to the mental health conference in Australia, which was also a co-design conference, and I'm hoping to present at the Paediatric Rheumatology European Society meeting. And all of that will come together for my ACAF application. You can see there some of my research supports, obviously not supervisors at this level, but people that are really going to support and champion you through. And for me, my project is really heavily working with the charity partnerships, and that's something that I've been doing a lot on at the moment, and you can see there the charities that have agreed to help me. So the development skills application, as I've already said, is a lot less than when you previously, if you did apply for the CDRF or equivalent through the NIHR. So the main bits of your application is you have a chunk, 1,000 words on your research background and 1,000 words on your training and development. So while it might sound quite simple, it's actually really hard to get everything you need into those 1,000 words. But yeah. So one of the things the NIHR we're always told their weighting is based very much on person, place and project, so a third in each of these areas. And what they are, so for example, you can be a really strong person, you could have had loads of publications, loads of dissemination, you could have done an absolutely amazing PhD project and be all singing and all dancing, a really great clinical expert. But if your project that you're proposing isn't particularly strong, then potentially you run the risk of falling down. You need to be strong in each of those 3 areas. However, maybe the new NIHR weighting that I've heard about is a quarter for person, place, project and PPIE. So really making strong your PPIE input into your project. And obviously your application will be assessed by lay members and PPIE members. So it's really important that that is really thought about as you go through. But actually my NIHR weighting, and this is what I would give it, is about your person, your place, your project, your PPIE. But it's also about the people around you, and it's also about your passion. And I'm going to touch on each of those in a minute and why I think they're important. So thinking about the person in particular, so we all come to this as a clinical expert. We are really at the top of our field about where we are, where we've been, what we've done. And often for these, especially for, I know for the ICA programme for nurses and AHPs, we often come along that bit older. We've had many years working clinically and actually now we want to develop it academically. So we could write pages and pages on our clinical skills, I'm sure. But thinking about our leadership, we also, because we're so senior generally in our clinical areas, we are leaders, we often lead teams, we lead people, we have quite a good grounding in leadership and about all of the skills that brings with it. Our research skills and experience, as we've already said, you have to have done a PhD for when you apply for this. So we have a good knowledge of research skills. So for me, I'm a hermeneutic phenomenologist. I love phenomenology and qualitative research. Are you going to continue along that path as you go forward and be a complete expert in that field, or are you going to branch out and develop your skills into other areas and learn from other things? What about your extracurricular activities? For me, I've been on the RCN Rheumatology Forum for 6 years. I'm on the British Society of Rheumatology Committee. I'm an associate editor for a UK journal, and I'm on the editorial panel for an international journal. All of those things you need to put into that 1,000 words about all the fabulous things you do in your own time, and how you are not just partaking in those things, but actually how you're leading and championing and changing things. What about your international profile? That's really important. The NIHR want people who can talk about work with international different people, learn from what is happening outside the UK. Obviously, the NIHR's focus is on the NHS and what's happening for the UK, but it's also learning from what else is happening. What about dissemination? And I'm not just talking publications here, but it's about proven dissemination. So have you done webinars? What kind of videos have you done for patients? What events have you been part of? And PPIE work, for instance. So thinking about all of your dissemination. And what about your publications? So I'm a nurse, as I've said. My H index isn't particularly high, but I have tried really hard over the last couple of years. And this is a bit of an old slide. I've added some new things in there, but it's not just about the high impact publications, but other things that you might have done. So writing guidance documents, writing policy documents, doing chapters for publications, chapters for books, those kind of things. Also conference presentations. Where have you done conference presentations? Have they been invited speakers? Have they been international? What did they involve? How did they lead to other things? Did you then disseminate in written format after your presentations? And deliverables, so delivering on time. Did you get your PhD done on time? Have you done things on time as you set out to do? Are you someone who is proven to deliver, and you can show that? Thinking about any awards that you might have got. These might have been research awards, these might be best practice, best posters. I recently got an award at GOSH, and I was the best lay summary for an adolescent symposium and best poster presentation. So all of that again needs to go in there, because that shows how you can deliver on these things. Thinking about grants as well, what kind of grants might you have achieved? As I said, I recently applied for the RDS PPIE, the PIF fund that they do, and that's a small grant for £350, but actually it's really important, and that grant will go a very long way in helping to remunerate patients and partner groups who are helping me with my work. But also applying for travel grants, applying for conference scholarships, those kind of things. I've recently been I'm a co-I on an Australian grant, and that's for 77,000. So you might be on all kinds of different things. Make sure you justify and put them on there. Supervision and mentorship is really important. MSc students, but also PhD students, and what's your role with them as we kind of increase that as we become more experienced as a postdoc researcher. And all of that works together with your personal qualities, which obviously you are demonstrating through all of the things you're describing here, thinking about time management, good communication, those kind of things. So then looking at your project, so this is really hard for the development and skills, because it's about a training plan. So it's about what is specific to you, where are your gaps, what do you need to do, and what are the best courses for you to do. So I wanted to do, as I've said, the intervention development. There's lots of intervention courses out there. I really looked really hard to the one that would give me the best and give me the best training. Visits and shadowing and network, as I've said, think outside the box, think where you can go, what will add to you in your clinical and you bring back. And your conferences as well. I mean, you might want to use the VTI framework, so you can plan all of this and you can show where your gaps are and what you need in particular and why it needs to be funded going forward. So it's the what and the why. And you need to justify that funding. So this is the funding that you get for the Development and Skills Award. So don't go over these, but think about how you can, how everything works together and adds up. But it's really hard because you're also talking about your long-term project, although you haven't got space to talk about that. But you need to talk about your patient benefit and why you need to do this, because if your patient benefit isn't strong, then there's no point in NIHR paying for you to do a really good training plan if your project later on doesn't lead to improvement in patient care. This might be progression from your PhD work, it generally is, and from where your expert knowledge is. And as NIHR projects, generally, they're your project. This is your passion. This is what you want to do and why it's important. And what's the need? Why do you need to do it? Why do they need to fund you? And then these things here are really important, and there isn't always an answer. But what about your timing? When are you going to start? When are you going to finish? What are you going to do when? Is your project too big, or might it be too small? Is it feasible, and is it realistic? So think about those. Briefly moving on to the place. So they're looking at the academic and your trust together and how they work in partnership. So this is looking at your support and your investment in you, and how are they going to support you to do that? As I said, my trust wanted me to work clinically, and I've had to have a bit of a fight to get to where I am at the moment. But you need to show all of that. You need to show that you're at the best place. And what early career researcher support do they offer you? So, for example, I'm one of the junior faculty co-leads at Great Ormond Street and at the UCL, and there's some really great early career researcher groups that happen and really a great teaching. You might want to look at the stats of your academic institution and how many complete into PhD and post PhD. And all of that comes together in your kind of host statement that we've talked about, and that needs to be really strong. Match funding was particularly hard for me. I had to think outside the box a little bit about how I was going to get this. My trust struggled very hard to understand the process and how it all relates together, and there aren't many role models out there. There aren't many people who forged this path, and so you have to think a little bit creatively. And I did go to some charities as well for a bit of a hand of this, but I got 100% matched funding in the end from thinking outside the box. So PPIE, as I've said, is really important, and thinking about what have you done so far and what has changed from your PPIE. So what suggestions have they come up with? What things have you adapted from what they've suggested to you? And then how will you engage with them going forward is really important. Is it going to be virtual, for instance, or face-to-face? We know that a lot of PPIE patients are asking for more stuff face-to-face now. They're sick of all this virtual world. And what is realistic that you're asking your patients to do? And is it really true PPIE? Are they really getting involved and engaged in what you're doing, or are you just telling them? You need to really show that you're taking it seriously with them and think about their compensation, their remuneration and their training. There's also help with LACE summary options, and the RDS is very good at doing that, but also putting your LACE summaries, you don't need them for the development and skills, but for later fellowships for your family and friends and asking them. So for me, I'm doing a co-design study, hopefully in my ACAF. So I am currently working with a very large group of young people and different parents. And so the PIF funding that I applied for has been absolutely fabulous to enable me to really thank those families for their time and their engagement and really show them that I value what they're doing with me. So most of you will know this, but moving forward into postdoc world, you don't have supervisors anymore. They're research supports. But thinking about your progression from your PhD, and this is really important. I was told when I went and visited Toronto in my CDRF that you need to show that you can go at this alone, but you are making the decisions yourself. You may well want a mix of professions. I'm a nurse by background, but as I've said, there's not many nurse role models. So who are you going to look for? And what about different methodologies? You need different people wearing different hats to you, and maybe some of those are international hats. Maybe you have people who got NIHR hats. Are you looking for the best people in their fields? Have you really gone outside the box and thinking outside your institution rather than just people that down the end of the corridor? But equally, if you're thinking outside the box and you have people all over the world, how are they realistically going to work together? How are you going to get people together so they can really support you? Thinking about mentors and collaborators is really important. And as I've said, I'm working really closely with the charities, so involve them. They're often really interested and really excited by our projects. You might also have a PPIE steering group guiding you, and you also might want previous healthcare professionals from the ICA scheme because they've been there and done that before you. So my last one that I think is really important is passion. And I think this is really, really important, and it's often really underrated. Chances are you have lots of passion and you're here for starters. So that's really good, but you need to be able to really show it and demonstrate it. This is not a time for imposter syndrome. You've really got to really So my top tips, this is my last slide, and I think it's really important with your RDS support. So the research design service has been fabulous with me. Elaine Kingwell in particular has really supported me all the way through, and I really suggest you speak to them and you get them on board. You start planning early, you talk to them and go to all the fabulous things they offer and help. They are the experts in what you're trying to do. Talk to people around you, talk to your line manager, your head of department, your academic head, talk to anybody who will listen to you basically, and get real engagement really early on. But also, what can you be doing now? You've got some time. Could you be doing that abstract? Could you be doing that publication? Would that put you a bit higher up the ladder? Thinking about your PPIE, as I've said, and also writing everything down. I write everything down because I forget things. Any kind of conversation you throw is really important to me, and I've gone back to those so many times. Find your number one fan. We all have them out there, and look after them in return, because they're going to be the person that when you're struggling that you go to, and they pick you back up and put you back on that track again. Thinking about your elevator speech is really important. What do you want to do and why? Why you? Just in a nutshell, just you've got 3 minutes. Tell me why I need to give you $250,000 to do what you want to do. Involve finance early, as you've heard, is so important. Get them on board, really make sure they're happy with your costings, because you don't want to fall down at the last hurdle. And as I've said, be passionate and believe in yourself. It's not going to be easy, but it will be well worth it. So that's it from me. So thank you ever so much for listening, and good luck.
Great. Thanks for playing that, Paul. We recorded that in 2022, and in February this year we heard that Polly had been successful in getting her ACAF award, so that was great. We worked with her on the ACAF as well, so that's great news. Okay, let's move forward with the programme. Our next speaker is Jane Sandel. Jane's a Professor of Social Science and Women's Health at King's, and importantly is one of the panel members, and it's in her capacity as a panel member we're going to ask her to give some insights into what they're looking for and what's it like at interview. So over to you, Jane.
Hi, can you see my screen?
Yep, we can.
Let's put it on presentation mode.
Yep.
So thank you, Peter. I have been on the panel for 4 or 5 years. I'm on the Advanced Fellowship panel, and I, as Peter said, I'm a professor in the social science, women's health. My academic background is in social sciences, in sociology, and my clinical background is as a midwife. So I think I have 2 hats on that panel. I have a clinical hat, and I also have methodological and social science hat too. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my impressions and what we think is important and what we look for as a panel member. So you've already had the presentation about the fellowships. I wanted to highlight a key point about the panel. Look it up. Look it up on the NIHR webpage. Look at the type of people who are on the panel. They're hugely varied. They normally include some people with a stats and economics background, health professionals, sometimes people from the social sciences. But the key point, and it's been made before, is that the people who will be looking at your application are very often not experts in your field. So you really have to make sure that your application is talking to brilliant researchers, applied researchers, but it makes sense to them. And one of the key ways you can do that is to get people from outside your field to peer review your application and say, I don't know what this means. We always make assumptions about what we know is what everyone else knows. And in my own field of maternity care and perinatal health, many people are not aware of the very basics of how services are organised or policy. So you really have to spell this out. I put the process here. This is what we do as a panel. We the other points I want to make before I move on my slide is just read the guidance. And if you're not sure, us program team will go to the RDS. Normally, when applications aren't successful, this is quite often the reason, along with give yourself enough time. And it normally takes 6 months to a year, depending on how developed your thinking is, to work up an application. And from first talking to the very first mentor about it to submission, it does take a while, so give yourself enough time. So from a panel point of view, we are, as a panel member, I'm allocated several applications to assess with some assessment criteria. We are asked to declare any conflicts of interest, so we don't see those applications. Our scores then go into the chairs and deputy chairs, and at that point they then go out to peer review. Then they come back with their scores and assessments, they're collated, and then looked at again by the chair and deputy chairs of the panels, and then an assessment is made on who should be invited to interview. So at the interview, 2 members of the committee will lead the interview. One will ask about the project, one will focus on the training, and then there is always a PBI interviewer as well. And then the rest of the panel can pitch in and ask questions as well, as can the chair at that point. So as a panel member, I usually have 2 or 3 applications that I'm interviewing for. So when you're applying for these, think about the aim of this program. This is so important, and it's a more common mistake than you would think that this is not a research grant application. This is a fellowship to build people with potential to become our future research leaders. This is an investment in you as a person. So quite often you can see what looks like a recycled grant application come in. It's a fellowship application. And not enough attention is paid to the training and the supervision, and not enough attention is paid to the development of you as a person, and where this significant amount of investment is going to take you from where you are now to where you'll be at the end of it and to where you'll be in the future. And it's often a common interview question that comes up too. So this is such an important take-home point, to think about these key things that have already been spoken about: the person, the project, and the place. And I'm going to go through each one in turn. This is on the website, but I'm going to talk about my take on this and how this plays out. So it's really important, because what we're looking for is someone who has potential. So if you're an early career researcher, you won't have so many publications, but it should still be clear in the section about you, about where you've come from and the kind of work you've been doing. And this can be additional work. It can be working with charity, doing work outside your day job, sharing, you can peer reviewing papers. NIHR has really good opportunities now for early career researchers to get involved in peer reviewing, and they've just put out a call for panel membership, actually, and mentorship to be on a panel. You can observe some of the panels. So it's looking for someone who has demonstrated a curiosity about their field of work and their field of research, is beginning to network with a wider network, and I would say is beginning to make links outside their own institution with other people in their field, which is not just their professional field, but methodologically or theoretically that are relevant. So I think they're the key points. Publications are important. There isn't a quantitative assessment of H index, but they are really important, because to be a research leader, you have to be able to publish. You have to be able to complete and publish research, and involvement in grant applications, and quite often is to co-investigator with other grants. So this is really important. The project is there as a vehicle for your development as a future research leader. So this is, as I said, where applicants can make mistakes and just put all their attention on the project and not so much on the application as a whole. So as I would say, the biggest questions are raised by the feasibility of delivery within the time scale, whether the right expertise has been brought in terms of statistics or trials units or mentorship, and the relevance to patients and service users and healthcare. And this is what I was saying about people in your own field may immediately recognize this is a really important problem and there's a research gap. That won't be the case for the majority of people reading your application and people on the panel. You really have to spell it out upfront about the importance of the work you're doing, and spell out what the impact may be for patients and for services. Patient and public involvement and engagement is really, really important. It carries a separate score. It doesn't contribute to the main score, but there can be, and there have been, revisions, conditional offer, depending on improving patient public engagement in an application. And really, really read the guidance, talk to your RDS. It has to be meaningful. And you have to get your costings right. And don't undercost this and how much it costs. And there's guidance on costings on the NIHR website. And along with that, EDI, which is also really important. When you're beginning to think about this, look at the NIHR strategy, research strategy, and it has all these themes about what are important to NIHR, and try and think, yeah, I've covered that. I've made sure I've included that. So this means thinking about where you do your research and the populations who are involved in your research, and very careful attention to how you will engage communities or populations that don't normally engage in research. And understand what good looks like, and this is having involvement all the way through from the very early design stage through to dissemination. There may be different types of people or organizations. Make this review of existing evidence does come up because there are questions about, well, hasn't this been done already? So do check this and say where the evidence gap is, and also look on the NIHR website of funded research. Is there something that is similar to what you're doing? If so, think about how what you're doing might be complementary, and contact that team about what your plans are, because it's brilliant to be able to show how you're networking more widely with other people working in your field. And the quality of the plain English summary often is not good. And so just get people to read that who do not know anything about research. Get RDS support for that. This is where your service user and plan stakeholders can help, and do it at the end. So you've got the rest of your application and your ducks in a row with that, and then do this right at the end. And finally, this so often is not well done, and it can let the application down. Normally, it's either the project or it's this section. So take this seriously. Use the VTI framework. Think about how you're going to answer the question. Well, where is your expertise already? Where is the gaps? How will this award boost and accelerate your progress to becoming a research leader? And make sure the training that you have planned is meaningful. So possibly a few days here and there are not going to cut it, but proper high quality training. Take your time with this. Under this heading is networking, visits to other sites, visits to other research institutes, spending some time. Quite a common question that's asked at interview is, well, who are the world leaders in your field? And who are the leaders in this country? And it's embarrassing if you can't answer that. Because this is about you becoming an independent researcher and knowing where the key activity is, and hopefully you contacted them, and maybe you have a mentor from there, or you've arranged a visit to that institution. This award is just such an opportunity, and quite often as a panel we look at this section and think, why on earth are they not taking the opportunity to go and visit here or here and really make the most of what the award can offer? Because your next research grant is going to depend on the networks you make in this application. So this is your opportunity to really strengthen them, and that includes international networks too. Your research support and mentoring team, there are sometimes some questions raised about having a PhD, having the same team as your PhD supervision team. It's not expected that people would move institutions. It used to be raised as a good idea because of work and family commitments, but there is a view, I think, that you have to get out your box. You've done your PhD, you've got a really good support network from your current institution and your PhD team. Now is the time to spread your wings and bring other people in with the disciplines that you need. And you're in the driving seat here. It's your award, it's your application, and you need to do your homework about who you would really like to have supporting you. And don't be afraid to contact people by email or PM them on Twitter, because most people I know are delighted to provide some mentoring support to researchers coming through the pipeline. As I already mentioned, getting host institution support is really important, and it's not just a standard letter. There is a lot of money. These awards, as Polly said, are highly valued. They're very prestigious. They bring a lot of money into the institution. What can they give you to support you and your success? So PhD studentship, sometimes technical reports, explore, and this has been asked on a couple of panels to applicants. So crucial, and also the commitment to ongoing what's going to happen at the end of your award. And also making sure that the people who you have in your department, the infrastructure in your department, or the infrastructure in other departments you're linking with, are going to be able to support you to do your research and support your development professionally. So that is also taken into account. I don't want to leave enough time for questions, so I'll stop sharing and hand it back to you, Peter.
That's great. Thank you very much. We have our panel Q&A in a few minutes' time. I'm going to run through a few slides on RDS support, and then we'll move to Q&A. So let me just share a few slides with you just to give you an overview of the RDS offer. Can I just check that those slides have come up okay?
Yes.
Yes, that's great. Okay. So just to conclude the presentations, we thought we'd just share a little bit more about the RDS offer. This is a very brief overview, just to say that we are part of the NIHR family. We're a network of support services comprising 10 regional RDS that work together to give national coverage. In London, RDS is a partnership between the 4 large academic institutions. We're led by King's in partnership with UCL, Queen Mary and Imperial. And we've essentially divided London into 4 geographical sectors. And so we can provide local support to those in South London through King's, East London through Queen Mary and so on. I'm sure you get the gist of that. Our overall aim is to increase the volume and proportion of high quality research funding applications, and we do that by providing tailored advice and guidance to applicants. This is predominantly for the NIHR funding schemes, for projects, programs and for fellowships, but we also support other national peer-reviewed funding streams, such as those offered by the medical charities and UKRI. Our support is completely free of charge. We support a range of applicants, those at an early stage of their research careers, those wishing to exploit an observation they've made in clinic, and more experienced applicants. And we do support those who want to reformulate their proposals. Maybe they've submitted an unsuccessful application and want to change that round and go again. Our support is often much more than research design. We can help identify suitable sources of funding. We review team composition, and we can suggest suitable collaborators. We promote the benefits of public involvement and the benefits of involving them at the design stage, at that early stage if you're developing your proposals. We provide feedback on the presented evidence and rationale, so we help get the narrative right, how to present and specify the benefits to patients, NHS and care. RDS advisors are academics. They're active and experienced researchers that work part-time for the RDS, and we offer a very broad range of expertise in stats and trial design, health economics, social care settings, public involvement. So I think we've got most areas covered, is what I'm saying on that slide. As you've heard, we provide specialist support for public involvement. We have a handbook which describes the fundamentals of PPI. We run regular workshops on the practical aspects of involving the public. You can apply for funding through our bursary scheme for PPI work whilst developing your application. We have support from a lay panel, which provide feedback on plain English summaries through our fast track review service. Access to our support is primarily through our website. You can book a drop-in session with us if you're at the idea stage and haven't written anything and want to just talk through your idea with an RDS advisor. We have a range of information events which we detail on our website, such as the one we're running today. You can request detailed one-to-one support through the website. You can view our website resources and also look at our blogs and other information resources on there as well. So if you request support from RDS, you'll be assigned a dedicated advisor who will act as your case manager. They'll provide some broad initial feedback on your proposal, on the research question, on the rationale you've given, some broad feedback on the overall design and public involvement. They will then introduce you to other members of the RDS team who will give specialist input on areas that are required. So if you're running a trial, that might be on sample size and trial design, for example. We also offer our fast track review service just for a review of plain English summaries, and our bursary schemes for both PPI and EDI. We also signpost you to other parts of the research infrastructure, to colleagues in trust R&D departments, to members of the CRN study support service, and also to trials units as required. We receive feedback on our service, and as you see on this slide, a high proportion of people are very happy with the service provided and would come back to us again for further support. But it's the most important message is on this last slide, and that's really to come to us early. Come to us as early as possible, ideally several months ahead of your submission deadline. You can work iteratively with RDS, and we're very happy to see you at the idea stage and help you develop those ideas into good research proposals. 2 to 3 months is a good point to get to us. If you want just to, 2 or 3 reads of your draft, you'll be able to apply for our public involvement bursary. But we do set a minimum of 4 weeks ahead of a submission deadline for us to be able to give any meaningful feedback. So that's a very brief whistle-stop tour of the RDS. I wanted to leave sufficient time for questions. So if I can now ask the today's speakers to join us again, we're going to open up the session for Q&A. Very happy to have questions either through the chat function, or if you'd like to raise your hand, that's absolutely fine. Now, see, we have a first question from Alex. Alex, would you like to come in and ask your question?
Good afternoon. Thank you. That was just incredibly helpful. I have a question which I guess would be focused for Polly, but hopefully somebody else can help. So the thing that I'm struggling with this application is I'm very used to writing project focused applications. So this kind of person focused application is a little bit more challenging. But Polly spoke about having a 25% project component. I would ultimately be aiming towards an advanced fellowship and getting myself the skills that I need to apply for the advanced fellowship. But I'm not sure where on the forms to include the project that I'm considering.
Sorry, is this specific to the Development Skills Enhancement Award?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So yeah, the setup of that application form is slightly different because there isn't a so if you're applying for an advanced fellowship, there's the plain English summary, scientific abstract, detailed research plan, which you don't have with the DSE. So essentially it's that other section which looks like the training where you're setting out obviously what training you're looking to undertake, but also in terms of where those next steps are as well, and also the applicant research background is an area where you can start to talk about where you want your career to go.
Okay.
So the application form is a little bit different just because it is a purely training award without a research project. So in there, they just want to get a feel for, you know, what training you're looking to undertake, what kind of intensive training you're looking to do during that award, and then also what that next step is, because part of the criteria is that, you know, what's the either fellowship or grant funding you're looking to undertake after the DSE. So where does that training take you in terms of what it sets you up to apply for?
I see. So it sounds like when Polly's talking about 25% of the application should be around the project, that's kind of being integrated into each of those sections of what that next step, that side step's going to look like.
Yeah, you want to kind of thread it through the application so you can kind of see where you're looking to take it.
I see. That's really helpful. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks. Thank you, Tom. Francesca, would you like to come in?
Hi, thanks so much for everyone. It was really an amazing session. And I guess my question would be a bit more for Armin. Thank you. The presentation was great. I really love the Anna Karenina principle. And speaking of that, I was just wondering, since I recently made an application and it wasn't successful with the UKRI, and I would be, of course, reshaping quite a lot of the fellowship if I applied for the advanced fellowship. And I know there's a section in the application where you can state, or where you should state, if the proposal was already submitted to another council. And so I was wondering, like, in how much detail do you go, particularly since the project would be reshaped and it would be changed? And also, do you think like those kind of proposals are less favored if they've been through another council and have failed? Yeah, just your opinion on that, I guess, to the other panel members as well.
Yeah, so thanks, Francesca. I believe that's usually for when you have a parallel application. You know, lots of things can happen in the past, but you know, it's probably I think Tom and Gareth can correct me, and also Jane if I'm wrong. But I feel like that you should do that. Tom, you want to say something here?
Sorry, no, I'll let you finish. Just doing to get. After you've done your comment. Sorry.
And actually, at the same time, I had an MRC application, but you know. And I just expressed that at the time of interview, my actual MRC didn't go through. And I was asked by the panels what happened. And, you know, I said that just failed. And I think, you know, the panel members, including Jane, they are academic members. So they understand like us, you know, part of the committee. It's not like someone on the ivory towers. So that's one side of the thing. But, you know, obviously, you know, advanced fellowship, NIHR is a very different scheme compared to other funders. So you need I spent, you know, at least a year, if not longer, to think through and you know, again, that was mostly about me. How it wasn't like, you know, it wasn't successful, let's find another funder. It was about myself. So I had, you know, an internal feeling to as a step change to move into applied healthcare research. And for that reason, then, I had ideas, of course, from my previous applications, but then you have to repackage that. So yeah, I think there are lots of details, but I would say, it really goes back to you, and you think it's, it's not just repackaging or recycling, that is thinking why, with yourself, really. And I don't really, again, Tom will correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think if you've done something in the past and if it's not at the moment, it's not live, I don't think it's too important. Tom, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to answer the question and also kind of give it a bit of an update about how the application form might be changing in the future. So there's certainly no judgment if you've applied elsewhere. A lot of people are trying for different funding. It's very competitive. I think, as you've already hinted, if it is quite a different funder, just making sure it's clear how it's been reshaped for this particular remit, and that will be clear in the rest of the application. There is a lot of work going on across NIHR in terms of trying to make ourselves consistent across if you're applying for a program grant or a fellowship. And there's always feedback about the application forms are a bit too long. So they are looking at sections to say, well, okay, where can we cut out some of that detail? One of the sections might be in the future that if you've applied for this elsewhere, or if you've applied for this fellowship before, let us know the details. So that might be coming out in the future.
Oh, okay.
So don't worry too much about it. And I mean, Jane might cover this as well, but I think sometimes committee members, if you've been to the fellowship before and you've applied again, setting out what's different is sometimes useful for someone who's seen it before. But again, that might be coming out. But I'll let Jane respond as well.
Thanks.
It's picking up on your point, Tom. It's really nice and it's really important to show how you can learn from feedback. And that, so if it's your second application, then say what you've learned and what you've changed as a result of that learning. It's the same with PPI. So in the PPI section, you can say, well, I initially consulted with my PPI or the RDS. I had this feedback, and this is what I've done to its chair. As a result, I have done A, B, C, and D. It's really important to show you have an open mind and you're open to feedback and not defensive in that, because I think it's a key attribute for an academic. Because Armin says, we all have grants that don't get funded and publications that don't get submitted, and we have to look at them as a learning opportunity.
Thanks so much. That answers my question. Thank you.
Thanks. Did you want to add a little bit more to that, Tom?
Yeah, sorry. We didn't cover it in the slides because we wanted to make sure we didn't run over time. But I just wanted to cover in terms of reapplications. So there were some changes brought in when the Advanced Fellowship was launched. So there is a limit on the number of times you can apply. So generally it's 2 unsuccessful applications before you'd be asked to have a break. So what wouldn't be counted is if you're deemed fundable, but we didn't have the budget to fund you. So it's just if you're rejected either at the remit, the shortlisting, peer review, or interview stage, you would be allowed to apply once more after a second unsuccessful application. Then there'd be a break of 3 years before you could apply. So the thinking behind that is we did used to get some very speculative first applications where people would just put in an application, see how it went, and then take the feedback. I'm sure that wouldn't be anyone on this call who would speak to the RDS, but we did have some people who would do that. So it was just to really focus that first application. As Jane said, you get the feedback, see how you responded to that feedback constructively, and then hopefully that second application is a lot stronger. So yeah, just to clarify that. But if anyone's got any questions on applications and reapplications, then happy to answer those.
Yeah, great. Thanks for clarifying that. Yvonne, would you like to come in with your question?
Thank you. It's amazing talk and taking a lot of notes on the discussions. I'm a biomedical engineer and mainly working on digital health solutions, machine learning, and AI algorithms. So for me, I know this fellowship for several years, but I wasn't there to apply because I wasn't sure whether this is something for people who are not clinically trained. So the first question really is to everyone to say, well, is this advanced fellowship, for example, fine for people like me who are biomedical engineering background, who work very closely with clinicians, have a genuine interest in improving the clinical need, and have a good plan in the front. Can we apply for it? And secondly is, I mean, from your current record, how many people apply per round and how many are successfully funded? Just as a statistics that we can learn and have something in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your question. Armand, do you want to start?
Thanks, Stephen. I'll leave the question number 2 to Tom and others, but of course you can also look at the website. I think that numbers are on the website anyway. Question number 1, of course, yes. You don't need to. I mean, I do have a medical background, but that was not necessary. I work as part of my fellowship in a computer science department. Again, the question is about benefiting patients. So the case should be clear. It's not really about what you've done the past 10 years in your life, really. How this can improve NHS, how it can benefit. So I think that comes through as a person to me, or perhaps to you, is to have the PPI members and the clinical mentors, and have that conversation how an engineer's work in AI is going to be one day implemented in NHS.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Gareth.
Yeah, just to offer a bit of reassurance, really, that we absolutely would be eligible for an advanced fellowship, and I think we're getting more and more applications into this area, so we're really considering the membership of our committees to make sure that they feel confident in appraising the applications like yours, and to make confident decisions with stuff like that. And just to say as well, regarding sort of applicant numbers and success rates, I think it's somewhere around 10 to 15 to 20%. Tom,
Yeah, I mean, it kind of varies on some rounds. I mean, I think there was a bit of an outlier for round 4, which would have been 3 years ago when COVID struck. Yeah. I don't know whether people were just at a bit of a loose end generally and just thought they put an application in. So we did have, for that round, we had 130 something applications, and we funded, I think, 13. So the success rate for that one was very low. But generally speaking, the average, I would say, is closer to kind of 15-20%. So we're getting applications closer to around kind of 75-ish, and we'd fund somewhere between 10 and 15. So yeah, it's competitive, but what we're looking to do is to try and expand funding in the postdoc area, because we're funding a lot of doctoral fellowships, but we want to try and expand the options for people to obtain postdoc fellowships, while we've got those kind of broad ICA programs, the local authority, and also for the advanced fellowship, we're looking to try and fund as many as we can. And I think Yvonne, people like yourself, we're trying to encourage people from those less traditional backgrounds to apply as well. And we've got some at the research prof level. We've got Jonathan Jeffers at Imperial and David Clifton at Oxford, who are engineers. So we're kind of from that level, and at the doctoral level as well, we're trying to encourage people to apply. As long as you've got a project that it kind of excites the committee and shows the patient benefit, then it doesn't really matter what your professional background is.
That's great. Thank you. Actually, I work in David Clifton's team, so that is why I brought my interest. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Jane, do you want to add anything more to that? Jane, did you want to add a couple of comments to that?
Yeah, I forgot what I was going to say, actually. Just on a panel, it's really not unusual to see people with different backgrounds come through, and it's really good to see those projects, because quite often they're a bit left field. And the crucial thing is to have proper clinical, frontline. Is this gonna run? Is this gonna wash? And your PPI work as well. Sounds like you're in the right place.
Thank you. The PPI really brought to my mind. I think I will do a lot more on PPI research and then make sure everything can be fused in, listen to patients' feedback as well. Thank you so much for all the comments. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question.
If I could just say one thing, sometimes there is a confusion because interviewing or qualitative research is with research participants is sometimes confused with PPI. they are two different things completely. Read and go and talk to your local RDS about what difference is, because quite sometimes I've, at sort of panel level, at interview level, I've seen that clarity having to be clarified at the interview, and you don't want to have to do that.
That's great comment. Thank you. And I guess I will make a very good use of the existing framework and contact with Peter's team, and then get well in advance being reviewed before the submission. Thank you.
My other point is to find out where your ARC is, your NIHR. Think about the rest of the NIHR infrastructure, BRCs and ARCs, and whether there's someone who you would want to, because they can really plug you into your local community and region.
So in terms of sorry for having just one more question. So for the NIHR, for example, if I work in Oxford and that is in not in the London region, does it mean I need to approach the local NIHR support for the fellowship, or I can approach the central at London office for support?
I'll hand over to you, Peter.
It's where you're planning to do your fellowship. So if you're planning to do your fellowship here in London, you'll be supported by the London team.
Oh, I hope that we have a team locally. That's great advice. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Yvonne. Daniela, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, hi everyone. Thanks for the great panel and information. So my question is quite a quick one. So what I wanted to ask is, so are these fellowships, so basically the DSE and the Advanced Fellowship, open to international applicants with UK-based hosts?
Tom?
Yes, I mean, we're not going to be the employers. So in terms of someone's nationality, that doesn't cause an issue. What you would need to do is, so whoever you're going to be employed by just needs to confirm that they'll be able to employ you for the duration of the fellowship. If you're successful for an advanced fellowship, if you don't have a visa, you would be eligible for the global talent visa. So you'd be kind of fast tracked on the basis that you've been awarded an advanced fellowship. But we don't, because we're not an employer, we don't undertake, kind of immigration or employment checks. That would be the responsibility whoever is going to act as your host employer.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think there are a couple of questions in the chat.
Yes, I was just going to pick up on that, Tom. Angela, would you like to share your question? Do you want to come in and ask that question?
Yeah, it was just the principles of the Advanced Fellowship that have been talked through. To what extent do they also apply to the Development Skills Enhancement application, please? I imagine they generally do, but
yeah, I mean, I think the assessment's very similar. Obviously, there's no research project attached to the DSE, but they'll still be looking to assess yourself as an applicant in terms of what your trajectory is, what you think you want this award to do in terms of making a step change. They'll be assessing the training aspect in terms of what you thought about the training that you need. Critically assessing your gaps and how this will fill it. They'll be looking at the host institution in terms of the support that they'll be offering, who you're picking as your mentorship as well. So very similar. I mean, the only difference is that there'll be a lot more kind of rigor around assessing a research project for the Advanced Fellowship, but the other aspects of the person, the training, the place, I'd say are assessed pretty much exactly the same across the two awards.
Thanks. That's really helpful.
And also in terms of saying, what you're mapping out where you go beyond the award would be the same for the Advanced Fellowship as the DSE as well.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. So we're coming up to time. I can't see further questions.
I think there was one more just around trying to find the list of advanced fellows. So I just started to type a response, but I'll just say to, is it Lila? That there is a website called the NIHR Funding and Awards website, which lists it. We're aware in terms of the search function, you're not able to filter particularly well, but we're looking to work on that. So you can filter, go onto it and say, who are the advanced fellows? And you'll get a list of everyone's funded, and there'll be a description of the plain English summary, scientific abstract, and contact details. Generally speaking, most award holders are quite happy to be contacted. So if you keep your eye on that, hopefully the filtering will be improved soon, so you can select individual awards and see who's been funded.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Tom. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Jane, have you got a final comment?
I have a final comment about how helpful it is to see a successful application. And some people are working in institutions where they have colleagues just ahead of them that are happy to share them. But it just makes such a difference when you can see, okay, I now get it. I see where I was, where I got the wrong end of the stick.
Great, thanks for that. So thanks once again for such an interesting and informative session. Thanks to our speakers, they were great talks today. And thanks everyone for joining us. As Paul said at the start, we've recorded the session, and that recording will be available to all the attendees. We'll be sharing that with you shortly. So yeah, thanks for coming along. For those RDS members who are expecting to join the next session, we're going to have a 15-minute break, and so we'll see you there via the separate link at 1:15. So thanks everyone again for joining. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks everyone. See ya.